Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Diamond Dudes, episode number 2. And thanks for joining us. We got a lot of great feedback on the first episode, so we're really psyched to do our second one. My name is Rob Bates, and I'm the founder and editor of the JewelryWire.com, and I am with
Edahn Golan, Tenoris, and my own consultancy company. And with us is
Avi Kravitz. I founded the Diamond Press and recently launched a few products. The Diamond Executive Club is the main sort of flagship product. But it's great to be with you guys. Good to see you again, dudes.
good to see you guys.
I'm hearing great things too. And let's have some space always at the end of every podcast, just to plug ourselves, so people know that they can tune out if they don't want to hear
the beginning, so that they don't tune out.
We're doing.
Yes, just to make sure that people know.
Yeah,
where we're at. Okay.
So how was your month, Rob? What's going on?
My month was pretty good. It was just Mother's Day, which was nice, and I'm just still trying to get this thing off the ground. The Jewelry Wire looks, it's pretty good. The initial response, so it's good. And I'm going to be going to Vegas in a little bit, and I think Edahn is also correct.
Yes, that's.
I've just booked my ticket on Spirit Air, so I'm very excited about that. And guys don't get it. Spirit Air is bankrupt, but no, I'm psyched to be going to Vegas, and I'm psyched to be seeing you in person, Edahn. And I'm sorry, Avi usually goes.
Yeah, I'm not going to make it this year, but I'm going to be in South Africa actually from this week through for the next 3 weeks or so. Mainly pleasure to see my family, but also a bit of business on the side. There's not a shortage of things happening in the diamond industry in that part of the world.
No. So you want to start off? Let's start off with let's talk about lab grown, since we talked about natural just about the whole time last time. I just watched yesterday your little diamond debate with Tom Chatham, and I guess if first of all, it was a great conversation. If there's anything I was a little disappointed by, was there was not enough debate, because I know you guys don't necessarily see eye to eye and everything, but I think you did a great job of finding information out from him. And he the guy has been around and really kind of understands the market. And I think one of the things that we as people who cover the industry have to learn is that it's just a very different kind of business. It operates in different ways.
Lab grown?
Yes, sure.
And it's totally different. I mean, the difference in terms of scarcity and pricing and, consumer demand, it's dictating a completely different approach to how to do business.
Well, one of the interesting things that Tom said, and he's from within the lab-grown space, is that the race to the bottom on pricing is not in their favor. Usually we see it from the natural diamond industry point of view, but he sort of expressed concern from the lab-grown segment that there's this that it's not sustainable. They got to do something to stop the decline in prices, which I don't know what they can do. I think unless market forces just sort of play out, and the many growers that are out there fall away, which I think is happening. Hey, Edahn. It seems there's some sort of a consolidation among the growing community in India, at least.
Yes. First of all, there is consolidation, which, helps them, I don't want to say prop up prices, but kind of slow down the process of price declines. And we are seeing, in that regard, throughout the pipeline. I mean, at retail, at trading, and at wholesale, and in manufacturing, we are seeing a slowdown in a deceleration in price declines, with and the most important force in that regard is the Chinese producers that have decided that they're going to be very firm on the price of rough HPHT, primarily HPHT.
Yeah.
And the Indian manufacturers, I mean, the growers are also sort of in that direction. The thing is that they are not only growers, they're also polishers. There's another element to that that I find fascinating. That is that practically all growers understand that they're not a jewelry serving business, but rather a technology company. Rob, you had that in one of the quotes you published last week, and it's absolutely so. What that means is that um, until they reach the technological breakthroughs that they need in order to serve the technology sector, they need cash flow because the cost of R&D is insane, and the way to get cash flow is in the jewelry industry, and that offers a dilemma, right? On one hand, let's just generate as much sales as possible. On the other hand, that means reducing prices, and they got to find a way to sort of balance those two.
Yeah, I mean, that was a point that Tom brought up. It's from what I took away from our discussion is that it's at the moment it's the diamond foundries and the De Beers of the world that have that technology. And one thing that surprised me, and what you're sort of alluding to, is that it's a different growing technique. It's a whole different science about in the growing, and that's why you have the sort of better funded companies, maybe like Diamond Foundry, like De Beers, that are pushing that are able to push in that direction because that's where the opportunity is. Whereas your more traditional gem growers are stuck in the jewelry market where their price is just being squeezed.
Yeah, I think that the Chinese HPHT guys, since they are either owned or partially owned by military and government entities, they are very military oriented, so optics, etc. I think there's a lot. There are. My understanding is from talking with them because they're very secretive. Many of the Indian larger and mid-sized growers also understand the importance of the technology side and and clearly believe that that is their future. So, to whatever degree they are um, increasing their spend on R&D just to reach that.
And I think the thing also about the technology side, which is interesting, is that if it really works to the extent that they want it to work, you would have a diamond in every iPhone, you would have a diamond in every computer. And I mean, maybe they would license its technology out, but none of these companies are big enough to supply that kind of demand. Right. So at some point it just becomes you're just researching to give something away. Um, I would say,
Why do you think give it away?
I mean, to license it rather,
Yeah.
to license it, yeah.
Well, I mean, it brings up a point that is the pricing structure of the lab grown diamonds for tech completely different from from that that you're publishing in your price list for the gem and jewelry market.
hmm
It's a
No, it
question.
is completely, yeah, it is a completely different
And it's
playing
still
field.
very early. Like, you talk to people about what is required, and people don't even really know. I mean, I think there's just kind of this theoretical idea of this could work, and this is a very good coolant, so you could put it in an iPhone and stuff like that. But like when you the idea that you know um and element 6 is it's um uh its finances are public, so you can see what kind of business it's doing, and it's still it's very early days, and it's a very small business. So it's in a way, um, it's something that, I think is still mostly theoretical from as far as what I can see, because somebody was saying, like, he talks to people and he said, well, what do you need for technology? And nobody really knows. I think there's this kind of this idea of
That's
this.
advanced science for you.
Yeah, it's something that people have not, from my understanding at least, have kind of really had a breakthrough with yet. But I think
You
they'll get there. I mean, as far as the gem market, um, I spoke to somebody last week who was talking about how we can't have a market with people just wearing 6 and 7 carat diamonds. It looks a little ridiculous, and that the lab grown gem market is going to better quality goods. And I guess he's producing deflawlesses and he's using HPHT. And what I thought was interesting is like, look, CVD can't produce this. This is his opinion. Not everybody agrees with his opinion. He said CVD can't produce this because if it did, the market would be flooded with deflawlesses, which it obviously is not, because that's just kind of the mentality, I guess, of the CVD producers as opposed to perhaps the HPHT producers. Is there? I guess my question is, and this is something that
hang
there's
on
obviously,
before you move forward. I want to say
yeah,
about Element 6 that they're probably one of the best performing units at De Beers.
yeah,
I mean,
definitely,
and literally profitable.
yeah, and they've been profitable, I guess, since their inception.
Yeah,
Um, uh, I would say also, I would say, do you think there's in the market, do people rate HPHT or CVD higher as far as what to buy? I believe um,
consumers.
you hear different things about which is cheaper. I mean, but do people think the one kind of goods is better than the other kind of goods as far as HPHT versus
Oh, it
CVD?
depends on who you're talking with. Consumers are indifferent. Retailers are knowledgeable, but they don't really care, it seems. Um, in terms of rough, the HPHD is much lower price than CVD. Just to put this in perspective, HPHD is anywhere between $10 to $15 per carat. CVD is 20, 25. So it's pricier, and it's because the process is pricier. I mean, we knew that from the beginning. HPHD is a very simple process. There's not a whole lot of science in there. Um, but once you have the polished diamond, about polished lab grown, it's kind of indifferent. I can tell you that when I create my price list, the quarterly price list, which is completely wholesale, you can see that there are areas where it's very HPHT dominated, just through how low the prices are getting. So today, 1 carat and below are almost exclusively HPHT.
Hmm. I've got a different question. Turning to retail. Um, what do you think if the lab grown industry is not selling by price, what would their added value be? What should they focus on in their messaging? Um, there's the human accomplishment and the science behind it, which might be a selling point. Pandora is trying to use the environmental angle again.
We got to talk about Pandora today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I
we'll,
mean,
we'll,
it's
we'll
maybe a
get to them.
segue to mention Pandora. But I don't know. I don't know if you can sort of transcend value beyond price in the lab grown space. I don't know how you do
Look. I
that.
think you can. I think you can do it with nice design. I think you do it with unusual shapes. I think you can do it with different colors. I think you can do it with a recognizable brand name. Obviously Pandora has not done very well with its line, but I believe Kendra Scott and Swarovski have done a little bit better. So um, it's it's just a matter, I believe, of, just getting the right design and getting a nice name behind it and getting something, as a cool, um, object, which I think, you know, I mean, we could talk about Pandora. I think, putting a carbon footprint info on it is like the worst sales thing
Sales
I've ever
pitch.
heard. It's like I can't imagine. Oh, even the most committed environmentalist running out to Pandora and checking out that carbon footprint number. Um, but yeah,
It's an
I think
add-on. I mean, it's an add-on that I think, your Gen Z consumer, which is the demographic, buys into, you know.
no, I don't, and I mean, I understand that aspect of it. I don't think it was worth all the publicity, and I think part of it was because their quarterly numbers were not very good, so they wanted some kind of big splashy announcement to kind of
New CEO, by the way.
take the focus. Yes, and new CEO also take the focus away. And I think they've definitely been having problems with sales and with their stock. So, uh, but yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to form a nice lab grown brand. I think the problem is all the lab grown brands tend to take the same approach, which is quote unquote eco, which is, they all talk about the same thing and that, we're helping the earth and all this stuff, but they don't really make themselves stand out as far as design, as far as anything interesting, as far as kind of developing a personality for the brand. And I think that's really uh, where they're falling down. But I would say also the same is very, very true in the natural business. So it's not like they're alone there too.
Well, it's very different from the natural business, and I think one important um, when we talk about the origin, right? So the only thing that really sells lab grown is the fact that there's a lot of desire for natural. That's the long and short of it. People liked it because wow, it's like diamonds. It is diamonds, but costs me a
Arguably.
lot less, and that is the price component is very appealing. If that race to the bottom that we mentioned earlier won't stop and will continue to the point where it's very low, I think that there are a number of concerns. First of all, the natural diamond industry should be worried that it won't it's going to be a heavy weight on bearing down on the positioning of natural diamonds. And then I walked what was it April 1st a couple of years ago, and one of the sneakers companies had a sneakers showed sneakers with diamonds on it, with lab grown. And I remember my first thought was, well, that's not far fetched. I mean, are they going to do that? And even though it was an April Fool's Day sort of thing, we're not far from that. I can, I can imagine that happening once the cost of lab grown is low enough.
Right. But I think,
So
I
they
don't
do
know,
need to reinvent themselves. And we're
right.
already seeing that the natural diamond, we spoke about it last time, the natural diamond industry is trying to reinvent itself. And I think lab should do that too.
Yeah, and I think, and it doesn't have to be the whole industry. It can be individual brands and individual companies. And I think one of the reasons, as I mentioned, that the lab grown industry did very well is because it did not have this historic um, uh, kind of burden of, De Beers is going to advertise for us or the Natural Diamond Council is going to advertise for us. A lot of these companies, especially when they had a lot of VC funds backing them, had PR firms and they sent out things. And I think that helped grow the overall business.
Well, I think the big challenge for the lab grown space is that there's such a disconnect between retail and the rest of their pipeline. And it doesn't really have a midstream as such. Right? There's no dealer market in, people aren't buying and selling lab grown as far as I'm aware. Um, but the difference in pricing between retail and those growers, which who are connected, who are directly supplying each other or buying from each other, is so great that that I think it makes that industry wide unification and messaging a bit difficult. the margins are all on the retail side at this point. And so and even and then within the retail segment, there's differences in pricing. There's no real standardization or uniformity in their pricing, and so I think that's sort of a challenge that they need to overcome to be more structured in order to push a more sort of unified marketing effort.
Well, I mean, first of all, there should be a price. It should be, cost plus, right? That's how one assumes it would do it. I remember
Well,
a while ago.
unless, as you say, there's a design element to it and a branding element
Yeah,
to it.
yeah, yeah. But
So,
uh,
That means
I
big.
remember
All
years
in.
ago, a former head of Blue Nile told me that he was kind of approached by lab grown people. And he said, well, how much should I sell this for? And they told him, whatever you want. And he just did not feel comfortable with that. And that's why it was one of the reasons, I guess, why it never kind of appeared on that platform. But I
But
think that's
but
kind of the,
that is so indicative of the way that industry behaved from the get go, right? It started by why did they say environmentally friendly, no, violence, no wars. It was a way to sort of bash natural diamonds and
and they're
get
still
a
doing it. And
and
Pandora's still
it
doing it.
dictated the language up until recently.
Yeah. Um, I, I remember, I mean, along those lines also. So, I mean, one of the things when lab grown first started coming out, um, I think there was obviously these huge, impressive margins, right, for retailers. And I think that was one of the things that attracted them to it. Um, but yeah, it's not an organized industry. And I think I was talking to somebody who was supposed to appear on a show about lab grown, and he said the broadcaster in this case could not find one person from the lab grown industry to go on and talk about it, which is crazy because there used to be tons of people from the lab grown industry
yeah,
that would
yeah,
talk
that's
about it.
interesting.
So it's just not organized. It's just kind of it's still. I mean, it's been what, like 10 years at this point. It's still in a lot of ways very shadowy. It's not very out in the open. There's one or two people who are kind of big public spokespeople for the industry, and Tom is one of them. But we really, it's the lack of organization is a little wild.
Yeah, they don't have a face.
Yeah. Or they don't, I mean, ideally you would have more than one face, but you want a face.
Yeah,
You want people who can come and talk about it.
and have some background.
Um,
Actually, there are a bunch of people out there that could be very good uh, spokespersons for the industry. Very eloquent, very thoughtful. I mean, there are two Indians that pop to mind immediately that I think could serve the industry very well. But they're busy with their job.
yeah, sure.
um,
Yeah.
And you mentioned you had a thing about in your last newsletter, I think it was called the lab grown dilemma, what you see that it's kind of caught in this cycle that we've spoken about.
yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is that you mean in terms of the positioning.
Yeah, but also in terms of profits, in terms of
Yeah, so there's this whole issue of, first of all, cash flow. How do you generate cash flow in a market where you're essentially a volume seller and not a high end seller, and we see that in the Tenoris figures that lab grown is huge on the $1,500 and below market, with the sole exception, and we got to keep saying that all the time, that the sole exception is diamond engagement rings. But people usually buy one of these, right? And not more. Um, so with that exception, the average price is always down. is always low, and then there is natural is moving up and up in that regard.
And that's the irony, was that the industry really believed in its heart, and still believes, you still have people say that bridal is for natural and fashion is for lab grown, and it's kind of turned out just the
It's an
opposite.
insult to the
Kind of fast.
industry.
Well, I think that may be Pandora's issue with lab grown, is that they're positioned in the in the wrong area of growth for the product, and maybe they're actually even too their pricing is too low, for
Well,
But
they
that was
said
the
the
idea of
pricing
lab grown.
they said the
right,
pricing was too
but maybe
high.
there's a threshold at retail where you kind of think, I'm not prepared to pay that little for a diamond,
It's actually you're bringing up a very interesting point. So for years, Pandora was a $200 to $500
Yeah,
per item price point, right? And the clientele were, my daughter, right? She's 17.
yeah,
So older teens and young adults. Having lab grown now, you can say, hey, we've got diamonds. Allowed them to introduce jewelry priced at $2,000, right? $1,500 to $2,000, and then add an additional demographic, right? Slightly older women. So women in their mid 20s to 30s. But I'm listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, is it possible that they're so well positioned at the $200 to $500 area that people don't think of them as a place where you can buy why you're nodding no? I'm wrong?
Yeah, because I believe the CEO said, she said people don't spend $1,000 to $2,000 at Pandora, right? So,
So
um,
so you
yeah,
sh I
and
agree
more
with
than that, I
I
think
agree with
there's sort of a social taboo about it, if about an an older woman showing her diamond to her friends and saying, "I bought this at Pandora." I'm not sure. I'm not sure that
it
that's
kind of
something that.
reminds me of the Japanese car industry, but you remember the first, in the 70s and even into the 80s, the Toyotas that were kind of small and low cost and easy maintenance, Toyota, Mazda, Subaru. And then they came out with new brands, right? So there's Lexus and et cetera, because they realize that, their clients are getting older and have more money and they will never, ever buy a Toyota again because that's, when I was a teenager or when I was a student and I didn't have a whole lot of money, I bought a Toyota. But what am I going to buy now? So now you should buy a Lexus, right? They
yeah,
had to create, and that's literally what they did. I mean, that is the marketing push for why they created all these new brands because essentially they're the same cars. I mean, I have a Lexus. My wife is driving a Toyota. Same dealership, same parts.
yeah,
You look at it, it says Toyota,
yeah.
Mm,
And I think, I mean, in Pandora's case, I mean, they want to be a jewelry brand, right? They want to kind of get away from just charms because I think
yeah.
they've topped out in charms. And they have a lot of opportunities to do that. I think I remember speaking to the old CEO and asking him, why don't you do engagement rings? And he said it's just a very competitive market, and we don't want to kind of get involved in that kind of price
Yeah.
competitive
But
market.
Brilliant Earth is doing very well in engagement and lab grown. I mean,
I don't know
it's
if they're
a very
doing.
important.
I think they're doing okay. I don't know if they're doing very well. I mean, we can talk a little bit about them, but
There was a period where
yeah, they did okay.
their yeah, but it was a combination of an increase in unit sales, of a decreasing price point for lab grown, and in the last quarter they made a change that allowed them to actually increase.
Right, and
Uh,
they're going more towards fine jewelry, so less towards like, hey, the hip college kids, and we're going to be in Austin, and we're going to be in like, all these college towns.
yeah.
Now they're starting
But
to set up in
is
Beverly
that
Hills.
is that a play for sort of a swing back to natural or is it just a higher point, higher price point, lab grown, better design,
You know,
better?
it's not clear. Victoria Gomelsky, who I do another podcast with, JCK Jewelry, she said she went to the Beverly Hills showroom, and most of the stuff is lab grown. So
Brilliant
it,
Earth showroom.
Brilliant Earth, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would assume at some point they would just start increasing the natural business if they really want to get into fine jewelry, because that's kind of what the fine jewelry customer traditionally buys.
Yeah, I can't remember if they've ever disclosed the percentage of their sales that are lab
They
grown.
never have.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
No,
very
there
excited,
was
and
a
they
point where
never
they
have.
had, but what they didn't disclose in this last quarter was average transaction value. So they said we had more of
Yeah,
this.
and you could kind of.
There was,
They
there was
always
one
said that.
key number in the middle that they didn't share.
They always said that
I
the
think they did
average
report it.
transaction value going down wasn't because of lab grown, but I think
Yeah.
it's not a
Uh,
um, perhaps unfair assumption to make.
Yeah, they have average order
order
value
value, right?
and
Order.
AOV, and AOV could be more than one item, right? Can
Uh,
you,
uh,
because you bought stud earrings and a bracelet,
yeah,
right, or a
yeah,
ring. Um, so that's, and then separately, they always make a reference to average transaction price, and the last quarter they didn't say anything. They said it was good. They didn't say, they didn't go into
right, right.
specific numbers. Um, that's the kind of thing that they usually put out on the annual, on the full year in the full year results.
Yeah. So with all this talk of lab grown, we should maybe the diamond dudes should maybe pivot to a bit of natural news. Or what are you? I'm very interested in what's happening in the mining sector. These mines are under such pressure now because there's such a big portion of their production that's almost unsellable, and their average pricing is being pressured to a point where their mines are just not not viable, as viable as they used to be. And so we see, like, it seems to me that we're seeing
Because
a
of
lot
lab,
of. Yeah, that's the point. So we've seen, Gachokwe, the closure of Gachokwe being brought forward by 2 or 3 years. Burgundy with its Ikati mine is, they filed for insolvency. Um, so I wonder, if I had a mining cap on, how I would be planning or navigating this environment. I don't know. It's very
Well,
challenging.
I was thinking after our conversation last time about desert diamonds and how it's kind of designed to promote the off colors, and and the kind of the browns, and some of the kind of the imperfections in the goods. And in many ways, if you think of this, is it's kind of one of the most important campaigns they've ever run, because really, if those goods don't sell, the mining companies aren't going to survive. So
but
in
the
a lot of
goods.
ways, I mean, I think we just kind of thought of it as like this kind of very clever marketing campaign, but I think it's in a lot of ways more important than we all realize, because they have to move those goods or mining companies aren't going to survive. So
So De Beers, follow their um, if you follow their quarterly production figures, is clearly accumulating. So it's run of mine, right? You gotta
Yeah,
use.
yeah,
It's easy to sell the 5 to 10s, but everything else requires a little bit finessing. So there's a buildup in inventory, and every once in a while they just have a massive offloading of the melees and PK goods, etc. At some point, these goods are so cheap that um, you can actually afford to polish them, and that's a nice thing, right? So they are.
Yeah.
Let's start with a broader picture. The broader picture is, unless you are a Lucara with Corolla or a similar operation, you cannot depend only on the high end. Petra is learning it the hard way. Um, and De Beers is not, understands that, and Alrosa understands that, and Angola understands that. You got to keep, the goods going out regardless of what comes out of the ground. It's interesting to see that De Beers, I think, very wisely went on this campaign of, this is a reflection of who you and I are. Older, experienced, battered a little bit, gray hair, scars, wrinkles. Yeah, no, I can see you got gray hair. I mean, Avi is shaving it away, but
Yeah,
but
it's
but the
actually
bottom
I've
line,
actually got a full head of hair. I just like the look.
but the bottom line is that you got to find a niche, and that niche has to be of interest to consumers and difficult for lab grown to compete in.
The problem for De Beers is that Botswana cannot afford to be in a niche. They need to produce, because production is a big part of their GDP assessments.
So you need to sell everything.
And to and they
You
need
generate demand.
and to yeah, well, yeah. So I mean, I had this conversation with Sally Morrison from De Beers, and and I think we touched on it last time, that the whole idea of Desert Diamonds is to market a segment of the market that's not traditionally moving as it perhaps should, and so there's an effort to broaden the scope of demand for goods that might not otherwise sell.
So I guess here's a question. Uh, Diavik is gone. Gachakwe is going to be gone soon. Akadi, we don't know what's going to happen with it, but it's not looking. We'll have to see. I don't want to
Canada,
condemn it, but yeah, it's looking
Canada is
shaky.
gone.
It's looking
Canada's
shaky.
dry.
I just saw today that the Finch mine may be closing.
Yeah.
I mean, what would with all these mines, and that's a beautiful. I mean, you hate to say a beautiful mine, but that is really like when I went there, it was one of the most beautiful mines that I've ever seen. As far as like the downstairs, it was just really, it was very modern and a very very nice mine. So, when these mines close, right, and we're starting to see all these mines close, will that help bring the industry back to health, right? That we will have a big drop off in carrot production probably over the next couple of years. And will that be kind of, even though there's going to be a lot of these kind of less desirable goods in the current market, will that help bring the industry back to health?
Absolutely. It depends on the industry. So I think there's going to be major consolidation in mining. All the smaller guys in Australia and Canada and all those guys are either gone or going. There are a bunch of tiny little mines in Africa that are sort of privately owned. So, they're off the grid. They're not mentioned. If some of these names, if I throw them out, nobody heard of them. But um, but their contribution is very small, is minuscule. The end of the day, what we're going to see is that there's Angola, there's De Beers, and there's Alrosa, and that those
I think the
three
Beers
will.
is Botswana, basically.
Well, yeah, Namibia and South Africa too,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, they're going to be, about 30, and 30% each, and everything else is going to, 10%. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if that will help them prop prices, protect them, manage supply, even if they don't discuss it between them, even though Angola is a total believer in cash flow no matter what. And then there is the option of, concentrated marketing, generic marketing. So those are the kind of things that I would love to see in the market.
Well, I think there's another element that most people ignore, and that is those are the structural changes that have occurred in the pipeline. And I have this discussion with uh, David Kelly a lot, the former CEO of the Natural Diamond Council, who would say to me, everything's about demand. But my argument is that the old way of doing business that the industry ran on for over a century was to feed goods into the pipeline and not necessarily therefore produce according to consumer demand. And that whole dealer market
That's gone.
particularly in rough, is gone. And even the polished market is diminished. There's a more direct route to market from the mine to the consumer. And so suddenly the industry is producing according to consumer demand, and it's figuring out now that it's always produced too many diamonds. And so there's this correction that's been going on, in my opinion, for the last 15 years, since 2008, that is realigning supply in terms of how we do business. And that's going to carry on for another several years, particularly in this environment where consumer demand is being pressured and eaten into by lab growth. And so I think we're going to see production continue to drop. If we're looking at 100 million carats this year, I still think it's too much. And
I think less.
Whatever the number is, I think that element of controlling supply. Forget about the negative connotations of it. But and I had this argument with Tom that that luxury products, luxury brands hold back supply, and it creates desire for the product. And in our industry, it's got to start at the mining segment, but you have less sort of coordination, maybe, which is a dangerous word in the supply segment. But if you think about how Angola is selling, Alrosa is selling independently, De Beers and Botswana have their own, their own agenda, and so it's very difficult to maintain those lower levels of production, which is required to really realign the market and create a more profitable industry as a whole.
Right.
And that's what we spoke about that last time. One of the things that the industry, the kind of hurt the industry, was the decision on the part of De Beers to not be a monopoly. But what you're pointing out at is I agree with you. I think that it's no longer a push pipeline; it's a pull pipeline. We were for many, many years a push industry. Part of the thing was that the repository for the diamond industry was the midstream. That's one of the things that kind of made their financing very complicated. And what are you going to do? You're going to sit on raw material and not manufacture it? Of course, you're going to manufacture it. So you have larger facilities, larger factories, and once you have that, your overhead. So that was insane. We need to credit not only the 2008 crisis, but also that Gareth Penny had accurately identified the situation and adjusted the company's model accordingly.
But it didn't. I think his solution was actually very smart, which is that it's not everybody relies on De Beers and the NDC to market, that people market themselves, and it becomes less of, what's De Beers doing and what's De Beers holding back. It becomes like about these individual brands, like how do they market to the consumer? Unfortunately, the way that particular strategy was carried out didn't necessarily work very well. But I think I do think that's in the end the better strategy, that you can't have, as somebody put it to me during supplier of choice, like if perfumes were just like, hey, if this is the big perfume, the perfume trading company, and there were no brands, like it just would not be an exciting industry. Right. And I think that's the problem we have, is that it is a race to the bottom because it is a generic product, because it is basically companies all selling, the same goods from the same people.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that he read the market correct. He read the environment correctly. The whole world was moving toward branded products at the time, and he wanted to encourage that move in the diamond industry. Um, it's a question that the industry is still grappling with. Do you create diamond brands or diamond jewelry brands? And to my mind, it's clearly diamond jewelry. That's
I
the
agree.
you know,
But you can do
but
either, you can do either.
you don't have. I don't. Besides what Hearts of Fire,
House of Fire.
I can't think of any other
There, there, ha- there
Hearts on
hasn't been.
Fire transitions
and
into
they've
a jewelry
transitioned
company.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
only component that I know of that is, um, has its own standing is gold, not just in jewelry. I mean, in general. I mean, it's nice to have, Intel inside, but what does it mean?
Yeah, no,
What's
I
the
don't think
difference
Yeah,
anybody
between
really.
yeah.
I mean, that
Intel
it's
and,
funny that everybody used to say, "Oh, like Intel Inside." Like anybody really bought a computer
yeah,
because
but
of
think of
Intel Inside?
exactly. But what about Nvidia? What about AMD? What about all
Mm.
these other, chip manufacturers?
But the other thing that I think Gareth maybe envisioned, and it will be interesting to see if he does become the new owner of De Beers, is that he envisioned a retail future for De Beers, and it developing as a luxury brand rather, and sort of moving away from its identity as a mining company. I think that's how he, in other words, it wasn't just a play for the industry. He saw De Beers being the leading diamond brand in the market, and then, building on that to, for its future. And it's clearly, yeah, it clearly failed with Forevermark. It'll be interesting to see how they go with this De Beers London project. But
And it made sense at the time, because that was the time when De Beers had been a monopoly, right, and was doing advertising for everybody. And they say, well, why should we do advertising for all these companies that aren't part of us? So
True.
then they started to say, okay, we're going to put it towards our own products, right? Which again made sense. It just didn't. I think, whether De Beers as a consumer name has any juice, I think is still a very open question, and it's been 25 years of this.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Basically, what Gareth said back in the day was when we were 80% of the market, it made perfect sense to pay for everything.
Yeah.
Now that we're 40% of the market, which was the case in at the time, they for every dollar they spent on advertising, they only had 40 cents in sales, right? That's the logic. And that didn't it didn't make sense. I mean, it's not logical to, spend so much per. So essentially that was the biggest driver to sort of bring in a supplier of choice and have site holders be a lot more active on in advertising and branding, etc.
Yeah,
but
I think it was a good idea. I think the way they did it was they kind of told site holders, look, you have to do this or you'll lose your site. And I think
Yeah.
that kind of
yeah,
led to a lot of panic.
Well, the thing is
and
that, if
especially
you're a
in the context,
manufacturer, if
especially
you're a
in the con-
manufacturer, that's what you know. I mean, that's, just like, if you're a miner, you know how to mine, to expect you to have a jewelry store and a lab and, a
And in the
diamond.
context of you holding all that inventory, like you mentioned earlier, it's their margins as it is were squeezed. But
Yeah.
but when what do you think about what do you think De Beers will be as a brand, as a company in 30 years' time? And I think I don't now it's very highly reliant on mining, But if I think about it in 30, 40 years time, it has to be a luxury brand, if it's going to
I
survive.
mean, I don't know if it has that. I guess the logic they used was they put it in their commercials. It's widely known. It's an old company. I don't think it has the greatest image. I don't think they ever figured out what De Beers quote unquote stands for, what it means. And there was uh, I remember a couple years ago they said we want to make it De Beers a known and loved brand. I think I think they've had a tough time really figuring out what the brand identity for De Beers is and why somebody would buy a De Beers diamond as opposed to a Tiffany diamond or a Cartier diamond when those two names have just so much more recognition and juice and things along uh, and just
By the way, that is fleeting too. I mean, think about it. 70 years of diamond promotion, and this new kid down the block shows up, lab grown, and all of a sudden,
No, but I think
and then we lose, and then the industry loses engagement rings, which is the thing, right?
yeah, but Cartier doesn't lose out because they are so savvy with their marketing and they present such a sexy product that people don't think about lab grown versus natural. They just go for Cartier. And the same with the other Richemont brands and even the
Which
LVMH.
is why they won't introduce it.
Yeah, because they don't need. Well, yeah, they don't need to. They don't need
Yeah,
to.
they
Their
shouldn't.
yeah, I
margins are
think
great.
It
Um,
doesn't align with the
yeah,
rest of
yeah.
what they're doing. But
Anyway,
but there's another thing about the Cartiers of the world, and that is that these guys, you will never ever walk by their store and have a big sign that says holiday discount or
nope.
sale or 20% off sort of thing, and which is insane in the industry because and how do you explain your margins? How do you support it if you don't?
yeah,
If you can give such deep discounts on everything, Rolex will never do it, right?
yeah, yeah.
Well, they don't have to. Um, if it ever comes to, we'll see
But they
what they
worked
do,
hard to
right?
get there. I mean, most Swatch brands won't do that either.
Anyway,
Yeah.
we approaching the hour mark. Before we close off, what are you guys expecting for JCK? Is it going to be more of the same, or what are you
So
guys?
A lot of
from what I
sweat.
hear, there's not going to be that big a De Beers presence at JCK as opposed to some of the prior years. It's not clear. I think they're going to do something. I think the NDC is going to do something, and I think there'll be continue to be a lot of government officials from Botswana and Namibia there. Um, but I don't know necessarily for De Beers. It's just not clear at this point. I could end up being wrong on this, but that's what I hear. Um, but I think it's going to be okay. I think there's still an issue with tariffs and people trying to come into the country. So I think that could be an issue.
Can I go on record and say that I hope the president of Botswana does not attend JCK this year?
And why is that?
Why is that?
I think it's below his office. I don't understand why he's there every year. He needs to be more presidential in. I don't think it's a good look. I might want to edit this part out, but
What about
but
the
I,
Minister of Mining?
What about our
Minister
yeah,
of
president
Mining.
selling?
that's fair enough. But even so, I don't know how much it actually adds for her to be in the industry environment as much as she is. You know.
Well, our
Okay.
president sells watches, so I don't know what to tell you.
Well, yeah,
I
but it's
think
not.
it's going to be a good show. I
Yeah,
think
I
it's
think it
going to
will be a good show.
be successful. There's going to be a lot of business, and I'm pinning that on one thing and one thing only, and that is that we are seeing that the U.S. jewelry market is growing. We're seeing growing demand. We're seeing growing revenue. Unit sales are down, and we're seeing a premiumization. So the average price point is moving up, and people will be happy to capture that. Talking of Hearts on Fire. Hearts on Fire is a classic example
Yeah.
of a company that kind of identified the change in the market, switched from one business model to another business model, and having a higher than average priced item, well designed, well made, etc. Those kind of brands, especially since they're recognized brands, I think will do well. Other than that, I expect the place to be hot, sweaty, uncomfortable,
No,
and
I
and
think it's going to
And
be
hazardous to
and
actually.
and and suck the soul out of you.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a strong show as far as buying attendance. I think the interesting thing about this K-shaped economy, so everybody's talking about K-shaped economy,
Yeah.
right? So Brilliant Earth is going to the top of the K, Cygnet's going to the top of the K. At one point, does that kind of top of the K become too crowded that, that there's just not enough room for everybody who wants to kind of target that kind of very affluent
You're
consumer?
saying there's too good of good?
Well, yeah.
I think everybody knows where the money is, and everybody's kind of going on a stampede towards that segment of the market.
Well,
Yeah.
I think Signet and Brilliant Earth are trying to play both sides. I think they leaned too far into the bottom of the K and are trying to sort of self-correct at this point. But you might have a point, Rob, because yeah, I don't see it as it's a choice that retailers are making, and it seems the sort of more top tier retailers are pivoting to value, whereas there is a lower price point retailer who's selling volume and maybe doing okay for themselves.
Yeah, and there
Um,
are a bunch of retailers that do that. I mean,
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
a successful business model for them. But at the end of the day, when people come to JCK this year, I think they'll be very focused on higher end, or at least
yeah.
having a couple of items in store. If you're not in that area, and I'm very positive for the show.
It sounds
Yeah.
like you guys are positive for luxury and couture.
Well,
Yeah,
we'll see. It's always interesting, but I think
So I
it's
got to ask you, Rob, something. What
yes.
are you up to these days?
What am I up to these days? Well,
Yeah, just throw in your plugs. I'm finding it. Just
I
plug
started
something.
in addition to
It's your
this
opportunity.
lovely podcast here, I started a publication called the jewelrywire.com.
Yeah,
And just go there and subscribe. I think a lot of people are having difficulty subscribing, but it shouldn't be difficult. And I call it the news you need in one quick read. It has just like a huge rundown of everything every morning, and I
I,
work
I,
very hard on it, and I'm very proud of it, and I hope people get some value out of it.
I got to tell you
Jewelrywire.com,
from the last
what?
was it 3-4 weeks that it's been running. I've been reading it religiously, enjoying it. I enjoy both the depth and the variety. You're identifying things that happening in the market that that eluded me, and so if somebody who spends a lot of time just trying to understand what's going on, if I miss a lot of things, then you're doing a very good job at that. So
Oh, thank you,
well done.
and you guys are
and
doing
it's the
great too.
one it's a one WhatsApp group that actually gives some value, and
Yeah,
because I'm on many and many on mute,
Yeah.
and this one is not. I get a lot from it.
good.
Okay, Avi, you're launching also a
Yeah, I've been working on this new area of the diamond press for the last few months. I published the Diamond Executive Report, which is a 93-page document filled with my blood, sweat, and tears. and it's a very big analysis on De Beers and the value of De Beers. We're not looking at who's buying or what the actual financial value or price tag might be. It's what the value that the company brings to the market. And within the report, I've sort of developed a diamond and jewelry tracker where I compare the revenue and operating profit of the publicly listed diamond and jewelry companies and sort of get a sense for what they're doing and the collective what the collective is as some sort of indication of how the industry is doing in different segments of the market, and all that's sort of feeding into the Diamond Executive Club, which is open for membership. So we'll see what
Nice.
happens.
And the report is a one-off, or is it a
No,
quarterly thing?
it's a quarterly. It's a quarterly, and I'll be looking
Every
at.
quarter, you're gonna write 90 pages?
Oh, it won't be. I don't know if it'll be 90 pages, but it'll be. The idea is to give a very deep analysis of a topic in the whatever's the industry's facing, and
I I
explore it.
I envy your stamina.
Yeah, me too. I
Yeah.
draw inspiration from Rob.
Oh no, I'm running out.
Okay,
What about
nice.
you, Dan? What's going on?
What about me? I actually just gave a presentation in Antwerp at the Antwerp Diamond Bourse, which was interesting because the interplay with the diamond traders, they feel they're in their element. I mean, that's the case, right? It's their bourse, and the kind of questions that were tossed at me were very interesting. Um, and I'm going to do a variation on that presentation at JCK. I'm presenting on, I think it's the May 29th, either the 28th or the 29th. I believe it's the 29th. There's a little confusion there on their side, but let's say May 29th at 11 at the 101, what is it called, floor platform area. And basically taking data that we have through Tenoris and other areas and putting them in context. Just try to understand, where can we operate, how, why does it, what are the benefits, etc. And kind of help see if I can help a couple of retailers and manufacturers do better business.
Yeah, and I should actually mention that I'm actually moderating two panels, the ones that Edahn has done and I have done in the past, one on natural diamonds and one on lab-grown diamonds, Friday and Saturday of the show, on the show
Oh,
floor.
nice. Okay.
The show wouldn't be what it is without your moderation
Well,
and participation, Rob.
Who are your panelists?
we have the head of the NDC. I believe we have the
Skipper?
CEO of GIA, Pritesh Patel. I mean, we have Stuart Samuels, I believe, is going to be on. This is for the natural. For the lab grown, I think we're getting a consultant, and we're still working. We're still working on it.
Nice.
I get a lot of emails.
It'll
It's
be
one of those things you
something
get a lot of
new.
emails on, and your brain
Yeah.
starts to swim. And it's going to be excellent panels. Trust me.
I'm
Trust
sure
me
they
on it.
will. I'm sure they will. They always are. I'm sorry, I'm going to miss being there and miss the opportunity to have a group photo of
Yes,
the
and
diamond dudes.
we could do a
Yeah.
live. We'll do a live maybe next year.
You can
What we
beam
can do
me
is
in.
Zoom from the
Yeah.
panels. I'll just jump in and say, "Hey, now here it is."
Okay.
All
Cool.
right.
I think
Okay, guys,
that's
it's been a
about it.
pleasure.
Take care.
Talk to you in a
And
month.
have a good show. Have a good, safe travels.
Thanks.
See you
Take
guys.
good care.
Bye.
Bye.